Nicole's life seemed picture perfect. A doting boyfriend, 3 adorable kids, and a job she loved as a teacher. But on that warm May night in 2016, everything changed in the sleepy town of Ledgeview, Wisconsin. Nicole, 31, and her guy Doug Dietrich, 35, had been an item for over a year. They just had a baby boy together. Sure, they had their ups and downs like any couple. Doug sometimes felt in over his head with instant fatherhood. Nicole worried he wasn't all in. Even with the occasional squabbles, they decided to hit the town on May 20th. They got a sitter for 6-month-old Dylan and met up with pals to catch a glam rock show at the Watering Hole bar. The night started off great. Nicole and Doug were all smiles, even snapping a cute concert selfie. But as the booze flowed, old issues bubbled up. Nicole was knocking them back way faster than Doug. When the show wrapped up around 11, the crew wanted to keep the party going at the Sardine Can bar. But Doug got sidetracked yakking with some high school buddies. He didn't rush over to meet Nicole, which rubbed her the wrong way. She was already feeling kind of insecure about them. Waiting at the Sardine Can, Nicole's mood took a nosedive. She started firing off nasty texts to Doug. "What bitch you with?" and "F you abusive asshole," and even, "Wow, what are you with?" because none of your friends know. Doug tried to chill her out with stuff like "LOL, stop," and "be good, see you soon," but his mellow replies just pissed her off more. Around midnight, Nicole stormed out of the bar in a drunken huff. Her pal Aaron chased after her, begging her to come back or at least cab it home. But Nicole was beyond talking sense to. She ended up on the ground, kicking and screaming at Aaron to get lost. The last he saw, she was stumbling off while yakking on her phone. Meanwhile, Doug and his buddy Greg were still chilling at the Watering Hole, clueless about Nicole's meltdown. It wasn't till 12:30 that they finally went to look for her. They swung by the Sardine Can, but no Nicole. Figuring she'd got a ride home, Doug headed back to their house. But when he rolled in around 2:40 a.m., Nicole was MIA. The babysitter Dallas was there with baby Dylan. Doug told Dallas that Nicole was probably crashing at a friend's to sleep it off. He smoked a little weed to unwind and hit the sack around 3. Doug got up at 6:30 to feed Dylan, then conked out again until 11. As the hours ticked by with no Nicole, he got more and more worried. He was calling and texting everyone, trying to track her down. But it wasn't till 4:30 that afternoon, over 12 hours since he'd last seen her, that Doug finally called the cops to report her missing. By then, the unthinkable had already happened. Earlier that day, a farmer found a woman's body in his field, about 3 miles from Nicole and Doug's place. She was beaten so bad they had to use dental records to ID her. It was Nicole. The autopsy showed just how brutal it was. Nicole had 241 separate injuries, including major head trauma and strangulation marks. Her broken nails showed she'd fought like hell. All she had on was a pink bar wristband and 1 sock. Cops zeroed in on Doug as suspect number 1. Why'd he wait so long to report her missing? He looked hungover when questioned and admitted showering that morning, maybe washing away evidence. A search of their place turned up blood in the garage and Nicole's car. Most damning of all, a neighbor across the street discovered a pool of blood and an electrical cord that appeared to have been used in the strangulation. It seemed Nicole may have made it home after all, only to be brutally attacked right outside her house. Doug was arrested and held in jail for 18 days while police built their case against him. But then the investigation took an unexpected turn. Lab results showed the blood in the garage wasn't human, and the blood in Nicole's car didn't belong to her. There was no trace of Doug's DNA on Nicole's body. What's more, data from a Fitbit fitness tracker Doug had been wearing showed he was sleeping at home during the time Nicole was killed. An insurance tracking device in Nicole's car proved it hadn't been driven that night. Reluctantly, police had to admit they may have arrested the wrong man. Doug was released from jail. The charges against him dropped. So if Doug didn't kill Nicole, who did? The answer would come from an unlikely source: Nicole's socks. DNA testing on the socks she was wearing when her body was found produced a hit in the national database. The DNA belonged to a man named George Stephen Birch. Birch was a 40-year-old ex-con who had recently moved to Green Bay from Virginia, looking for a fresh start. Standing 6 foot 7 inches tall and weighing 270 pounds, he cut an imposing figure, but he had a troubled past, including prior arrests for burglary and grand larceny. When police dug into Birch's background, they discovered a wealth of incriminating evidence. His phone's Google location data placed him at the bar near where Nicole was last seen, then at her home address for an hour, then at the field where her body was dumped. He had even searched online for news about Nicole's murder in the days after. Birch was arrested in September 2016 and charged with Nicole's murder. But at his trial in February 2018, he spun an outlandish tale in an attempt to pin the blame on Doug. Birch claimed he had met Nicole at a bar called Richard Cranium's and they hit it off. According to his story, he drove her home and they were having consensual sex in his truck when Doug suddenly appeared, knocked Birch unconscious, and proceeded to brutally murder Nicole in a jealous rage. Birch said Doug then forced him at gunpoint to help dispose of Nicole's body, but no one believed Birch's story. Perhaps most unbelievably, Birch, a large athletic man with a history of violence, expected the jury to believe he was easily overpowered by the smaller Doug and didn't fight back or try to flee. However, Birch's phone data actually did corroborate parts of his story, which made the case more complex. According to the Google dashboard data from his phone, Birch was indeed at Richard Cranium's, a bar close to where Nicole was last seen, in the early morning hours of May 21st, 2016. The data then showed him at or near Nicole and Doug's home for about an hour, then at the field where Nicole's body was found, and finally at the location where her clothes were discovered. The prosecution methodically dismantled Birch's claims, presenting a mountain of forensic and technological evidence pointing to his guilt. In addition to the DNA and location data, they noted that Birch's hands showed signs of injuries consistent with Nicole's defense wounds. The jury found George Birch guilty of first-degree intentional homicide after barely 3 hours of deliberation. He received a life sentence without the chance of release. The judge called it the most brutal murder committed by one person in the history of Brown County. He noted the extreme violence of the crime, where Mr. Birch kicked her or stepped on her head, and she was already dead. How enraged must you be to harm someone in that way? For Nicole's loved ones, the conviction brought a measure of justice, but could never heal the deep wounds left by her senseless murder. Her parents spoke at the sentencing of their devastating loss. "We are just shells of the people we were," Nicole's mother told the court. Doug Dietrich, who had faced the horror of being falsely accused of murdering the mother of his child, said in a statement, "George Birch is a monster who ought to spend the rest of his days rotting in prison. I request that Birch be granted the same level of clemency that he denied Nikki. None." In the end, it was a case where modern technology played a crucial role in both exonerating an innocent man and convicting the true killer. Doug's Fitbit data and the car tracking device helped clear his name, while Birch's own phone betrayed his movements on that fatal night. In the years since the murder, Doug Dietrich has focused on raising their son Dylan and keeping Nicole's memory alive. Nicole's 2 older children from her previous marriage split time between their father and Nicole's parents. The family continues to grapple with their immense loss while trying to move forward and honor Nicole's legacy as a caring mother and a dedicated teacher. George Birch remains in prison, his appeals thus far denied. Nicole's case stands as a sobering reminder that even as technology advances, allowing us to track our movements and communications like never before, the darkness that can reside in the human heart remains as dangerous as ever. Her story cautions us to be vigilant, to look out for one another, and to treasure every moment with those we hold dear.